What's up, guys? Toad back with you again. This is the college football week 11 show. Week 11, I've kind of spread the bets out. So I had a play the other day on Northern Illinois. I have a play that's in play right now on UCLA, and hopefully they don't blow it. I mean, UCLA was up 7 a little while ago. It was tied. They're back up 3 right now. And last I saw, they had the ball with a few minutes left. So hopefully they can put this away and at least cover. Although I'd like the money line cash, because if UCLA does cover, I'm only going to have a 3-2 night, which, I mean, I'll take it. It's not horrible, but I wish it was better. St. Joseph's in basketball, I don't know what happened there. Hofstra won. Cleveland Cavs won. Those were both easy wins. And then Houston Rockets didn't get there. Still trying to get my footing in basketball. I'm below 500 in NBA so far, I think by 1 or 2 plays, and exactly 500 in college basketball. So that stuff needs to turn around, obviously. But we're here to talk about college football, man. So if UCLA does get this, hopefully they do. I'll be 2-0 so far this week. That better be the case. On this show, I'm only going to have 2 more plays. I think they're both pretty strong, though, pretty solid. I like them. I'm going to talk about a couple of extra leans. I will talk about some of the bigger games of the week as well, as I usually do, but there aren't as many this week for college football. The college football playoff rankings are finally out, so we get a glimpse into what the committee is thinking about what they're going to do as far as the playoffs, which they differ from the AP polls a little bit, although not really any surprises in there, but I will say that there are a couple of teams that I think are just obviously overranked if you look at what those teams are power rated at and how they get lined, like in the actual odds the odds makers put out versus what their rankings are and where they are in the playoff picture. And those 2 teams that I think are overranked fairly significantly are BYU and Miami. I mean, I don't know if I have to reiterate that, but I think those 2 teams, they haven't faced the most difficult schedule really, and I think they just continue to kind of overperform. So I would expect maybe those teams to crash down at some point. But if those teams, if Miami and BYU wind up like 3 or 4 seeded in the playoff, they're going to get a big edge, because that means that you get these other teams that are like Alabama, Georgia, maybe whatever. You get these other teams that are in there beating each other up in the first round of the playoff. And then whatever team makes it through that first round will be totally beat up. And then BYU and Miami will get that team. It just doesn't seem totally fair to me, to be honest, that BYU and Miami don't really deserve that ranking, and they're going to get that like first round bye, and potentially at least, and get an opponent in that second round that got totally beaten up in the first round. So take from that what you will. Let's look at the Saturday slate here for college football. I don't know if I'm going to do like a basketball one. I've been thinking once basketball really gets into gear, I may switch over to doing basketball Friday nights, because college football will be over. I'll talk about basketball tomorrow morning, but I haven't handicapped it at all yet, so I don't even know what I'm going to do as far as basketball is concerned. But this should be a shorter football show, though, like I said, because there aren't as many huge games or games that I really want to discuss here. So, I mean, we could just kind of get into it as far as some of these like bigger games or biggest games. Florida, Texas. I mean, I don't know if I really wanted to even talk about this one, but I guess I will, just because there are some angles in this one that you might be able to look at. Where Florida, I mean, they're coming off a big rivalry game, of course, against Georgia. Always a tough game for Florida. They came in within the number in that one, barely covering. Florida still sitting at 4 wins, and they're running out of time, man, because this is a really difficult schedule. So I don't even know if they're going to be able to gain bowl eligibility at this point, but I would think that they're still at least trying to do that. In Florida, I mean, this offense really hasn't been that bad necessarily. I mean, they're just, I don't know what it is, man. I mean, they've lost to all the better teams that they played, and that's just pretty much the way that it goes. Texas also still trying to fight, because Texas is, I mean, they're fighting for playoff ranking as well. They're in the SEC now, and this SEC is a cluster, man. So all these teams still need to play and continue to win. Texas just squeaked by Vandy in their last game, and they had a bye, I think, coming off of that. So Texas is the more rested team coming out of this, because they had a bye last week, and they didn't play particularly well against Vandy, even though I know it was a ranked Vandy team. But Texas was coming off that first loss of the season to Georgia. Tough game, so they were not in a good spot. and they almost got caught. Vandy, who I'm going to talk about Vandy in a little while. Vandy seems like they're always like catching opponents at the best time this year, and they continue to just get by on that and be overrated, and they caught Texas at a good time, covered that number. Texas, after not playing that well there and having a bye, not really having any other big games up next, and needing to show up in all these games, I think Texas would be the way I would lean slightly in this one, even though the market looks totally against it. They have the rest advantage, and they're the better team at the very least. They're up from 21 to 21.5, basically, in the market, at least. 64% of the tickets, 58% of the cash, though, on Texas. Obviously, this is not a game we're going to be playing, but just maybe worth pointing some things out there. Georgia Ole Miss, this is one of there are only two actual top 25 rankings. What's up, Hugh? What's going on? I don't know where my usual viewers are, by the way. They usually show up on Friday nights, man, because they know I do this on Friday nights. Nate is here. There you go. What's up, Nate? Nate is always here because he wants to run his picks by me, and I disagreed with every single one of them last week. All of those plays. I'm sorry, Nate. Georgia Ole Miss, this is one of the biggest games. The two big games, the two actual top 25 matchups, I don't have a strong read on those, but I am going to talk about them anyway. These teams, man, I think out of the four teams that are in those two big games, Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU, Georgia is really the only one of those teams that can afford a loss and still get into the playoff, because you're talking about Ole Miss is sitting here with 2 losses, so Ole Miss needs this game more, man. So that is one factor in this game. Georgia, they're coming off the rivalry game against Florida. That's always a big game. Georgia still needs to show up if they want to stay on top of the SEC standings. They would like to get into the SEC championship, but this SEC is a total cluster, man. And having to go to Ole Miss, I'm just not sure that this is the greatest spot for Georgia, even though they are the better team. Ole Miss, I think, is maybe being overlooked a little bit right now, especially offensively. I think Ole Miss is the better offense of these two teams, even though Georgia is the better defense. Both of these teams are very well-rounded. They're both good offensively and defensively, but I think you're looking at slightly better defense for Georgia, slightly better offense, or maybe more than slightly better offense for Ole Miss. That offense is quite good. Georgia, like I said, they're coming off a couple big games in a row. This is a big game against Florida, but maybe they didn't put in a full effort in that one because they didn't cover the spread, but still, that's always like a grind, a big game between those two teams in the world's biggest cocktail party. And they do have Tennessee up next, which is another highly ranked team. I don't know if that would be cause for a look ahead, though. Going to Ole Miss, it's not like they're necessarily going to overlook Ole Miss, but it may be a bit more of a difficult spot for Georgia than it is for Ole Miss here. Ole Miss, they're coming off an easier game last week, even though they put up 63 points last week against Arkansas. Jackson Dart, man, he put up over 500 yards, and this Ole Miss offense didn't even put any. How can you blow a team out like that and have no rushing stats, basically, from your leading rusher, who also happened to be Dart, their quarterback? I don't know what happened in that game, man. They're just throwing all over Arkansas, it looks like. I didn't see the game, but on the one hand, that's going to make Ole Miss look way too good because they put up 63 points. But on the other hand, it was a game that kind of took less of an effort than Georgia's did against Florida. Georgia-Florida, more physical game than Ole Miss had against Arkansas, where Ole Miss just lit them up and didn't really have to put in a huge effort there. So Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss would be the way to lean in this one, taking the points at home, although I know the line has gone down a little bit. You need a bounce back. Yeah, you were too plump and gay last week, Nate. Cincinnati -4.5. I don't even know what I think about that Cincinnati game, man. I can give you my thoughts. I can take a look at it again. I looked at all these games, but that game did not stand out to me at all. So I can talk about it in a minute. But I do lean to Ole Miss a little bit in this one because I think they put in a little bit less of an effort last week, and they need this game more. Ole Miss sitting at 2 losses. Georgia sitting at 1. If Ole Miss loses this game, they're probably going to be out of the playoffs. So they're going to need this win more than Georgia needs it. So I think Ole Miss is going to show up in this game. Georgia's down from 3 to 1. So you do see, like I said, this line is moving. Georgia is public, 73% of the tickets, because, of course, they're Georgia. They're the higher-ranked team. They're the team with the better record. the public is going to come in on Georgia because remember, I mean, the one thing about Georgia is that over the last 3 years, they haven't lost to any team besides Alabama. So if you're taking Mississippi here, you are bucking that historical trend, though. So I'm not doing it, but it looks like the market is indicating on the Ole Miss side the situation. I think is the situational read would be to the Mississippi side as well, not strongly, but somewhat. 73% of the tickets, 58% of the cash. So Georgia's public with less of the cash on them, and the line is moving, man. So like I said, if you missed the 3 on Ole Miss, you missed the best number there. So I don't know about taking like the 1 point at this point with Ole Miss, but I do lean to that side. I would not be shocked if they win this game, even though it would be Georgia's first non-Alabama loss in like more than 3 years. Thank you for the top eggplant tower there, Hugh. So that's what I think about Georgia Ole Miss. And then what else we got here on the schedule? I don't even know if I want to talk about Michigan, Indiana. If you really want me to, maybe I can. But Iowa State I'm going to talk about, even though they're playing a bad Kansas team, just because Iowa State could be in a little bit of a bad spot here, man, because they took their first loss last week to Texas Tech. And whenever a team that's highly ranked like Iowa State takes their first loss, and they really did not face that difficult to schedule here, man. I mean, look at this. Like, their biggest opponents were Iowa. That was a really close game. And then Texas Tech, also a really close game. Both 1-point results, and they wound up losing to Texas Tech. When you are a team that's ranked like that, you're undefeated, you finally suffer your first loss, you do tend to see that that tends to hang that team over a little bit into the next game. So I would be a little bit worried about Iowa State coming into this game, at least as far as covering it is concerned. Kansas, they're actually coming out of a bye. So Kansas is actually in the better rest spot. And they went into the bye on a bad note, but it was also, they went into the bye almost being able to beat their major rival in Kansas State. Kansas almost beat K-State, and they had the lead late in that game. So I can see that going both ways for Kansas. Like, are they just going to be like mired in that loss like for like throughout the bye, or is that bye going to help them like kind of get over it? Because if they were playing right away after playing really tough against Kansas State, I would say they're absolutely in a fade spot if they were playing the next week. But that bye might help mitigate those circumstances a little bit. And now you're looking at Iowa State coming off suffering their first loss and not having a bye. So I think the lean against Iowa State would be the way to look at this. And this line is crazy, dude. It's down from -3.5 to -2. 71% of the tickets, 53% of the cash. So this looks like that Georgia line a little bit with Iowa State. The line is moving way down on Iowa State here. I don't know if that line actually surprises me. I don't know if they're injuries or what, but yeah, I mean, it looks way too easy to take Iowa State, Nate. So I would lean to Kansas in this one for all those reasons that I just said. I don't actually want to do it, especially just because Kansas, their last game was that big game against K-State, and they might be, well, Kansas, on the one hand, they know they're probably dead, and they're not even going to make a bowl, but if they're going to get up for any game, it's going to be a game like this where they have a conference foe that's a ranked team coming into their place. They probably will get up for a game like that. So, and again, the line just looks so suspicious. It looks way too easy to lay it with Iowa State. But again, if you like Kansas, you're missing the boat on that one. You're not getting the 3 or the 3.5. I don't know if it's going to go back up tomorrow because Iowa State is public. But just like with Georgia, you see a very public road favorite here that almost looks way too easy to take. And the line is reverse moving against that team. So the money is actually coming in against that team. So the lean is to Kansas in that one, but not terribly strongly. But again, like I said, it tends to be one of those spots where if you lose the game, like it's one of those spots where you might lose the game twice when you're a team that was undefeated and you lost that first game. Army, North Texas, this is an interesting one, so that I'll talk about it briefly. Army, they're coming off one of their big service academy games, man, although maybe we could take a little bit less away from that because they didn't play that well in this game. It was against Air Force, and Air Force is way down this year. Air Force is terrible this year, so that's the one thing. Even though Army against either Navy or Air Force, those games are always big because the service academies, they play each other. It's like a round-robin thing, and the team that does the best gets the Commander-in-Chief trophy, so those are big rivalries. All those teams want to win, but Army really didn't necessarily play their best game in this game, and they didn't cover against Air Force, and Air Force Air Force is just so bad. They just can't even really score. So I don't know what we can really take away from this Army result here. So I don't think it's like the typical like big time battle between Army and Air Force, but Army does have Notre Dame up next after having to go on the road here to North Texas. So this spot doesn't really look like the easiest to me, and they may have a look ahead to Notre Dame, although there is a bye in between there too. They have a bye, and then they get to face Notre Dame. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a tough read, but it looks like it's not really the best spot for Army here. And Army, of course, they're still undefeated, and they're still in the rankings. So Army, they're going to have a target on their back, man. And North Texas is actually coming out of a bye, whereas Army, I'm pretty sure Army played that Air Force game last week, right? They're not coming out of a bye. I forget who has byes at this point. Yeah, they played last week, and North Texas did not. So the last North Texas game was that game that I played. I won on Tulane in that game against North Texas. North Texas went into that bye on not the greatest note, even though it was two fairly close kind of big games against Memphis and Tulane. They still lost both of them, went into that bye off of that. So that bye might help them. And also, North Texas may also show up in this game because they need one more win to become bowl eligible. And I mean, they're going to get it anyway, though, because they're facing some pretty weak opponents after this. So they're most likely going to get that sixth win at some point, but it is also a big game just in general with Army coming into their house. So I think the lean would be to North Texas in this one. You're not going to find me playing Army, and this line has plummeted as well. This line has really moved down from -6 to -3 on Army, and I don't know if all of that is just market movement or if there's an injury there too. I don't really know what the injury situations are. 64% of the tickets on Army. 69% of the cash, however, on the other side of North Texas. So some pretty strong market signals on the side of North Texas. So that's the way I would lean in that one. But, I mean, I'm not playing it. Iowa State, yeah, I gave you that one. Mizzou, who are they even playing? I don't know. I'll look at that one again in a second. I looked at it a little while ago. Urjo, I don't even know why they're called the Black Knights. Their logo is like a black horse. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I mean, you'd have to look up the history on that. What else was I going to talk about here? So I talked about North Texas. Let me see. Colorado, Texas Tech. I mean, this is a tough read too, man. I'm talking about way too many games. I was like, oh, this would be a quick video, guys. Yeah, all right. Colorado, they're, I believe, coming out of a bye. Yeah, they are. They last beat Cincinnati, but they went into a bye on a pretty nice note, winning 2 games and getting bowl eligibility after they did not have a great season last year and did not make a bowl. So that's a big win, man. When you're a team that doesn't make bowls very often and you get that bowl eligibility, and they went into a bye on that note, they went into that bye on a nice note. So I could see Colorado not really having an advantage having that bye at that point. That bye looks like it might be kind of a momentum stopper there for Colorado. So I don't love that bye schedule, like as far as the timing of that bye, I guess I should say. I don't like the timing of it for Colorado. But then again, they're going on the road playing Texas Tech, and I don't like the spot Texas Tech is in either because they just got their 6th win to become bowl eligible, which is always a big milestone, although they're still probably going to be focused when they're playing a ranked Colorado team, Coach Prime, and that team is coming into their house. So I don't know if they're necessarily going to be unfocused, but they are also coming off that big win that I just mentioned over Iowa State. That was a big win for Texas Tech, man. They beat ranked Iowa State. They were 14.5-point dogs in that game. So Texas Tech isn't exactly in the best spot either, and they played last week, whereas Colorado did not. So you have Colorado, who I think went into that bye on such a good note that bye isn't going to be helpful. Texas Tech, I think, is in a letdown spot, but still might be focused because it's Colorado. If it was any other team, I'd probably be going against Texas Tech here, but the market does look like it has some indicators towards Texas Tech. Colorado is up from 3 with juice to 4.5, though, and they're public with 62% of tickets because obviously the public's going to come in on a ranked Coach Prime team there with Coach Prime's kid there playing quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, and with what's the guy's name? The wide receiver was going to be one of the top draft picks. Travis Hunter, is that his name? Whatever. Yeah, so Colorado does, they are loaded with a couple of really talented guys there, but still, Texas Tech, 53% of the cash on their side, though. So the cash discrepancy in this game does look like it's on the Texas Tech side. I'm not playing this game, obviously. I don't like the spot for either team in that one, but the market read is on the Texas Tech side. You could argue that the situation is better for Texas Tech in that one slightly, but it's not a situation where I want to play on that team off of the big Iowa State upset, so I'm not going to do it. Change Army's mascot from the Black Knights, the African American Knights. Yeah, maybe that's why they're called that, because they started integrating the armed forces. Man, that's why they're the Black Knights. Let me see here. So that was Texas Tech. What else we got? These games don't really interest me, to be honest. All right, obviously I'm going to talk about Alabama LSU. This is another ranked matchup here. Number 11 against number 15, and the other one was number 3 Georgia against 16 Ole Miss, which I forgot to explicitly say that. So for that reason also, it looks way too easy to take Georgia, where it's a line where it's almost like you're picking the winner of the game pretty much, basically, with number 3 against number 16. I think Ole Miss is being underranked at this point, and Georgia is basically close to being appropriately ranked. Alabama, LSU, there are a couple of different thoughts I have in here. I think LSU is they're probably around where they should be ranked, just because their offense is really good and their defense is not good. Alabama, I think, is better than the 11th ranked team, but in this spot, I'm not sure that I really like Alabama in this spot. And this is a big game, man, because I think the loser of this game, both of these teams are sitting at, or LSU sitting at a 1-loss record here, but Alabama's sitting at 2 losses. And I think if whichever team loses this game, I think is going to be out of the playoff. So I think this is a loser dies, like win or die type of situation. So both of these teams are going to bring it. Alabama is coming out of a bye. I think actually both teams are coming out of byes. Alabama went into the bye on a good note. I mean, blowing out Missouri, but it's not like they're going to be unfocused against LSU here, but it is a tough environment having to go to LSU at night. Everybody knows, the LSU factor. LSU always plays really well at home at night. It's very difficult to win there. So even though I do think Alabama is the better team, I'm not quite sure about this spot as far as Alabama is concerned. Even though Alabama is the better team and does have the better defense. I usually like the better defense, but I'm not totally sold on this one. And then you got LSU. They went into the bye on a bad note. They lost pretty badly to Texas A&M, but then again, it also ended this long win streak that LSU had. So I could see that type of game going both ways. Like, is that going to be the type of game that hangs them over into the next game, where it's like you lose the game twice? Is that bye going to help them kind of get over it, whereas Alabama went into the bye on a much higher note? I'm going to lean to LSU in this game, and the deciding factor is just going to be the market read here. Alabama's down from 3 with even money, though, to -2.5 juiced. So not a huge line there. It's basically been 2.5 essentially all week. 51% of the tickets are on LSU, so actually it looks like maybe a slight public side on LSU. Not really, though, because it's only 51%, but 69% of the cash looks like it's on the LSU side. So LSU does look like they're getting some of the bigger bets in this game. And maybe I don't know that it looks too easy necessarily to lay a 2.5 with Alabama as the higher ranked team. But I mean, I would think that the public would maybe have a little bit of a tendency to do that, because Alabama, huge name team, they've been the better of these two teams recently, and they're the higher ranked team. So this comes down to like, which team do you think has a more advantageous bye, basically? And I think maybe LSU does, but I don't want to really buck Alabama having the way better defense in this matchup, though. So that's the one major issue that I have with actually playing LSU here. Yeah, LSU in Death Valley. Yeah, I mean, teams do not want to have to go into that situation. But, I mean, Alabama, at the very least, is a team that's kind of used to doing that. But, well, Nick Saban is not there anymore, though, so maybe not as used to it with DeBoer there. He has not had to experience that before. And I don't know that Alabama's quarterback has yet either. Milroe, I forget how long he's been there, but maybe with him they haven't played at LSU yet either. So maybe it's going to be a bit more of a difficult spot there. Oklahoma, Missouri, you want me to talk about that, Nate? I guess I will. Oklahoma, they're coming off beating Maine. I mean, okay, crushing Maine. Like, I don't know how they got a game against Maine scheduled in there, but that was actually maybe a helpful win for Oklahoma, man, for two reasons. And that's one is that breaks Oklahoma's loss streak. So they were losing a bunch of games there, but Oklahoma's had a really difficult schedule, man. I mean, since those first three wins, they then had to face Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss. I mean, there's no let up there. Every one of those teams is pretty good. Even Auburn, who is, I still think, underrated here. They finally had an easy game, stepped down in class, and they beat up Maine. So I think that's actually helpful as far as their momentum is concerned, because that gives them a win. It breaks their losing streak. Coming into this game, yeah, I mean, and it wasn't that much of an effort either, so it was kind of like a tune-up for Oklahoma there. So I think that all helps. And look at Oklahoma's record, man. 5-4. They're looking at the remaining games here. The most likely game they're going to be able to win here and get that bowl eligibility here, if they need to get that 6th win to become bowl eligible, I think the most winnable game is probably this one against Missouri, because on the road at LSU, we just talked about that. That's probably not going to happen. Against Alabama, I mean, they are playing them at home, but still it seems kind of unlikely. And Missouri's been a little bit more inconsistent, so it seems like maybe Oklahoma has a shot, and because they're sitting at 5 wins, I think they might be a little bit motivated here, whereas Missouri, they got their 6th win, so they are bowl eligible, even though they probably had higher aspirations coming into the season. They were a top 10 team, so maybe they were shooting for playoffs, and maybe it's looking like that might be slipping away. But maybe they'll still show up because they do still think that maybe they have a shot at making the playoff, although I don't really think so at this point because they're down to the number 24 ranked team, so maybe they don't legitimately think so either. They are coming out of a bye, although, like I said, Oklahoma's game last week was really easy and probably a helpful momentum starter. Missouri went into that bye on that bad note, getting shut out by Alabama, so that might help Missouri kind of like refocus a little bit after an ugly loss, even though it was to a good Alabama team. So that bye might actually help them kind of refocus. And they don't really have huge games up next, even though South Carolina is the best remaining opponent they have. Tough read, man. It is a tough read on this one for me. Missouri, so Oklahoma's flipped from 2.5 to 3. So that the fact that Oklahoma's laying 3 on the road, that looks so suspect that I'm going to say that that's got to mean that Cook isn't back, right? Like, you can tell me if I'm wrong about that, but Missouri lost Cook in this game against Auburn, their quarterback, and he didn't play last week, and he didn't play 2 weeks ago against Alabama. Pine did, and Pine was awful in that game. Missouri did nothing offensively in that game. So if Cook is still out, I mean, that doesn't look good for Missouri, man. It's going to be the second game without him. And that first game without your quarterback, you're supposed to, like, it's supposed to be that injured player theory spot where the team steps it up, and they really did not do it. They were not able to do it. Thanks for the tower with the hard R there, Hugh. So this is a really tough read for me, man. But the fact that Oklahoma's favored on the road, that has to mean that Cook is still out, right? So all that being said, I would lean to the Oklahoma side, and the public is coming in heavily on Missouri because why wouldn't you? Oklahoma has not looked very good at all. Missouri still looks decent and is still a ranked team and has the better record. It's like, oh, Missouri is getting 3 points now at home. Yeah, Cook is ruled out. Yeah, otherwise Missouri would be favored. So, I mean, is this line an overreaction to Cook being out and Pine looking so bad against Alabama? I'm not so sure, man. I mean, maybe there is just that much of a drop-off between Cook and Pine. I don't know, but, I mean, it looks way, way, way too easy to take points with Missouri here, taking the 3, because all indicators are that Missouri is the better of these two teams, but odds makers are telling you that with that Cook injury factored in, that Missouri is not really the better team in this case. 78% of the tickets and only 71% of the cash on the Missouri side, with the line actually moving up to the 3 here. So actually the 2.5, so I think Missouri minus 2.5 was probably what the line was going to be if Cook was playing, and that's also kind of interesting because that's Missouri not even getting home field. So the odds makers are actually telling you that even with Cook in there, Oklahoma is actually the slightly better team, and with Cook out, that Oklahoma is that much the better team, even though the rankings and the records and kind of the eye test all would kind of have you looking the other way. So I lean to Oklahoma in that one. Obviously, like as I say with most of these games, not a play for me though. And then what do we got? I'll talk about Washington, Penn State. This almost made my card. I almost wanted to play Washington because this just looks like one of those lose the game twice situations for Penn State, man. The only thing about this is Penn State still going to think that maybe they have a shot at the Big Ten because there are a few games left. They're still one game out. They're tied with Ohio State still, who Ohio State, power ratings-wise, I actually think Ohio State is the best team in college football, not Oregon, even though Oregon did beat them. That was a close game with a big home field advantage for Oregon there because Ohio State's not used to playing there. But back to Penn State. Penn State might still show up just because they still are not totally eliminated yet. But that was a big game against Ohio State, man. That was their biggest game of the season. That was huge. And Penn State had chances in that game, man. I mean, they were in that game for a while. They were out to a 10-0 lead, although it was because of a pick six. But they had the lead for a while. Then they fell behind. They were still in the game almost right up until the end. They were still within one score, and they wound up losing that game. And like I always say, when you're an undefeated team and you lose like a huge step-up game like that, that can really hang you over into the next game. So I don't like the Penn State side here. They don't have anything up next. I mean, Purdue, that's not going to be cause for a look ahead. So it's not a sandwich spot, but it is, I think, a hangover spot where they might lose that game twice or lose that game twice, at least in that they might not have a good game here and they might not cover. Because, of course, they are a big favorite here. But then you're also looking at the naysayers are going to be coming in, man, because the naysayers are coming in, and they're always naysaying James Franklin, man, because the knock on him is that his teams, just, especially with Penn State, they just dominate the lesser opponents. They bully the bad teams, basically, but then when they have to step up and play like the best teams that they face, they can't get over the hump and they can't win. So Penn State might be hearing that all week, too, and I don't know how that's going to affect them either. And looking at Penn State's schedule, it hasn't really been that difficult. I mean, on the road against USC is pretty difficult. We know Illinois, as I keep saying, is not as good as what their ranking would tend to indicate. And then Ohio State, obviously, is the best team that they face. And they did play pretty well in that game. They played competitively. And I don't even know if Penn State's quarterback came back for this game because they had a quarterback injury issue. It looks like he did. So Aller, he is their starter. So he did play in the game, but he did not have a good game. Ohio State, I mean, very good on both sides of the ball. And he was coming back from having gotten injured in the previous game. But I think it's a bad spot for Penn State in that one. And looking at Washington, they're sitting at 5-4, so Washington's one win away from getting bowl eligibility. So that's a little bit of a motivator. Whenever that team is sitting at 5 wins, they don't have that many games left, although probably they're looking at this UCLA game where they're playing at home. That's probably going to be the game where they're most likely to get that bowl eligibility. They are coming off kind of a big game themselves as well, where they played against USC, the old Pac-12 matchup there against USC, who's not a bad team either. So Washington coming off a pretty decently big game as well, and they're having to travel to a place that they're not used to playing, and they have not been good on the road, man. I mean, look at what Washington has done on the road against these Big Ten opponents, being new to the Big Ten and having to go east to all these Big Ten places. They lost at Rutgers, they lost at Indiana, they lost at Iowa, and I was on that Iowa game. It was a bad spot for them, in my opinion, but just in general, they have not looked good in these road environments, in these unfamiliar environments, and they're having to go to Happy Valley in a night game here too. So I don't want to play Washington either in a spot like that, so it's a pass for me, but I think the spot is worse for Penn State. Penn State's down from 14-12, and they are public, 81% of the tickets, but 88% of the cash on them. So I don't know if that means that when the line dropped below 14, if there's some professional bettors, like some big money bets coming in on the other side, and maybe there are bettors coming in on both sides of this total. I don't know. It is also a low total from 40. It's up from 46 to 46.5 though, with 88% of the tickets and 84% of the cash on the over. So a public over, but the line's moved up a little bit on the over. That is still a low total. So if you're looking to fade Penn State there and take the points, you at least know you're probably getting a little bit of extra value with the number there, just because the total is so low. Each point is worth more, but you've also missed the 14 on Washington, although I don't think it was 14 for very long. When I saw it, it was 13.5 in the middle of the week, so I don't know if the 14 was really there for that much, although obviously you'd want the 14 if you wanted to play Washington. You want the best number you can, obviously. Boise State outclassed Oregon. Boise State played well against Oregon, man, even though Oregon won that game. Boise State, they're one of the best offenses in the country. They're a fun team. They're good. Their defense is a bit vulnerable, though. But Oregon, as I have said, I don't think Oregon is actually the best team in college football either. I think they're somewhere in the top 5, maybe because their offense is so potent. But Oregon, their defense also can be had a little bit. Fuck UCLA. What did they do? They better not have blown it for me. Hopefully that did not happen. I don't know. I don't have it up right now. Or do I? What happened here? UCLA won. Yes, moneyline cash for me. Nate, I apologize. I know you're still mad about UCLA last week. But that's two moneyline underdog cashes in a row for me on UCLA, man. I'm 2-0 in college football this week. I want to make it 4-0, baby. I'm going to talk about my bets shortly. This is still going to wind up being a bit of a shorter video here. So those are my thoughts on Penn State, Washington. I think I pretty much covered that one. Penn State, like I just noticed they were not in the greatest spot there. And then you do have this BYU-Utah game. I mean, this is the battle of Utah. I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about this, but BYU, I think they're coming out of a bye, so that bye might disrupt them, man. I keep saying BYU, something is going to happen here, man. BYU, I don't think they're anywhere near as good as what they're ranked right now. They're ranked 9th in the country. Give me a break. I mean, one of their best wins was at SMU. Yeah, and that was a game where SMU, they were not off and running yet with Jennings at quarterback yet, so not really a fully formed SMU team yet there. And then their other big win was this horrible spot that Kansas State was in, where Kansas State turned the ball over massively. BYU just had every advantage in that game, basically, as far as turnovers, special teams, whatever. I won money on that one because it was a really bad spot for Kansas State. And then other than that, really BYU has not played a hard schedule, man. It has not been that impressive. So I think BYU is pretty overrated. And they're coming out of a bye, and that bye could halt that momentum, man. So when you're BYU and you're running like this and you're undefeated, the last thing you want is to have a bye come in there and stop you from playing. You want to keep playing, man. You want to keep that momentum up. So that bye might hurt their momentum. And they are playing up against this Utah team, who Utah still probably would like to get bowl eligibility if they can, but this Utah team has completely gone off the rails after they were pretty highly ranked to start the season. Cam Rising got injured in multiple different ways and just was never able to come back. And Isaac Wilson, who I think is Zach Wilson's brother, and he looks like it. Let's just put it that way. Zach Wilson, we know, failed NFL quarterback Zach Wilson, who was the quarterback for the Jets last year. And yeah, we saw how that turned out. Isaac Wilson is looking like he's even worse than his brother. I'm pretty sure they are actually brothers. Isaac Wilson has not been the answer here. But Utah, I mean, they haven't lost these games by that much in these last 4 games here. That Arizona game was without Rising, and then Rising tried to come back in the Arizona State game, got injured again, and then I don't know what to say about Utah with Wilson in there. They just have not really been able to do anything offensively, but their defense has still been showing up. So this Utah team, their defense is still playing, and if they're going to show up for any game at this point, it's going to be hosting BYU. Like, this is a big in-state rival here, and BYU is like, they've now established themselves as the bigger brother out of the two of them, because BYU is undefeated, and they're ranked 9th in the country now. So BYU is now like the big dog in the state of Utah. So I think Utah might actually show up for this game. If they're going to show up for any game, it's going to be this one against their in-state rival here. And Utah's coming out of a bye, too. So this bye probably came at a good time for Utah, man, because they had lost a bunch of games in a row, 4 games in a row, including losing to Houston. I mean, what the hell is that? So that bye might help them, man. They might start, like, game planning more, knowing that Wilson is in there, get that playbook ready. They're going to be getting ready for BYU, man. So I actually like the Utah side of this one. I think both teams coming out of a bye, and when you have teams that are going in completely different directions, but then that bye comes in, that bye can stop the momentum in both ways, man. So I think it might stop BYU's positive momentum, and it might stop Utah's negative momentum. So I actually like the Utah side here. And this line looks way too easy to take BYU. You're talking about the 9th ranked team in the country who's undefeated at 8-0, It's down from 4.5 to 3.5. You're only laying 3.5 against a 4-4 Utah team that hasn't been putting up any offensive numbers with Wilson in there. I mean, no like recreational bettor is going to come in and be like, oh yeah, give me Utah here. It looks like 54% of the tickets and cash on Utah. That just doesn't even register with me. I don't understand how BYU wouldn't be the very public side in this one. So I don't know if I even buy these percentages, but I do like Utah plus the points in that one. Zach Wilson, yeah, he's the MILF Slayer. I love, that's the one thing I love about him. I shouldn't shit on him too much because, yeah, even though he's not been good in the NFL, he's been good at playing the field with his teammates' moms. So, yeah, Zach Wilson, hopefully he's teaching his brother, Isaac Wilson, something there, too. And they can be a dual threat there. They can wingman each other trying to get the Cougars when they go out to the bars. Oh, the Cougars? Wait a minute. What? The Cougars? Isn't that BYU's team name? Am I losing my mind here? Oh, man. Noted Cougar Slayers, the Wilsons. Is that a sign? Are we living in a simulation? Is Isaac Wilson, brother of Zach Wilson, Cougar Slayer? Younger of the two Cougar Slayers? Is he going to come out and slay the Cougars in this game? Maybe. Yeah. It's not a play for me, though. I'm still not going to bet it, but I like Utah in that one. If you want me to pick a side in that one, as far as all the games I've talked about, that's not like the weakest of those leans, man. I will put it that way. I do like Utah in that one. All right, let's get to, well, I was going to get to my actual plays, but I guess I'm going to comment on UCF too, just because this is another interesting spot, kind of, I think, for UCF. This UCF team, I just think they're kind of under the radar, man. I think they're underrated. I think they've been underrated for most of the year. I mean, this UCF team, they can really run the football with Harvey there. I mean, this guy, he's one of the best running backs that you've never heard of, pretty much. I mean, he's put up so many 100-yard totals this season, rushing-wise. I mean, this guy is good. This UCF team can run the football. And I think the fact that they won this game against Arizona last week, I think that's a momentum starter for them, man. So that broke their loss streak they had. They had this ugly loss streak that started with Colorado. We know Colorado's a little bit better than we thought they were going to be. Florida hasn't been that bad either. The Cincinnati game, and that was their worst loss. I don't know what you can say about that. Maybe they just got caught in a, I don't know, in a spot where they were looking ahead or something. But also, it looks like they were having quarterback issues or something. They switched quarterbacks. So UCF, they're down to like their third quarterback now. Rizek, it looks like he's in there, but he actually put up a good performance against Arizona. So you might see maybe UCF is actually getting it together offensively now. And you can't really blame them for losing to Iowa State and BYU, really, even though I said, well, BYU is a little bit overrated. And I thought that was a bad spot for BYU in that game. But UCF was also coming up playing Iowa State really tough. So it wasn't a great spot for them either. So that one was a tough read, but now I think because UCF got that win, even though it looks almost too good that they put up 56 points, I'm not necessarily going to want to be on a team that put up 56 points last week because maybe they look a little bit too good. But I think the fact that that broke a long loss streak for them and they finally got a win, just get that monkey off your back basically, and you get to just focus and just play. I think that's good. And because UCF is a ground pound team like this, they put it on the ground so much. I think that's actually helpful against these former Pac-12 teams. Like, I think that's what came into play in this Arizona game. These former Pac-12 teams, they're not used to like physical styles of play. They're used to like more finesse styles of play, except for Utah. Utah was the one team that played like physical and like ran the ball and played defense in the Pac-12. None of these other teams did. So Arizona State might not be ready for this, man. And UCF, they got that win, so now they're sitting at 4 wins, and they're probably looking ahead and thinking they might actually be able to win 2 of these games here, possibly. These games it's not out of the question that they might still be able to become bowl eligible, so I think UCF is going to show up focused here, even though they are having to go to an unfamiliar environment in Arizona State. So that's one thing that I don't like about that is that they're having to go out to a place that they're not used to playing. But Arizona State, I think they're in the somewhat worse spot here because they have Kansas State and BYU up next, man. So at the very least, I think it might be a little bit of a look ahead, and they just got their 6th win. So even though beating Oklahoma State's not impressive at this point, this Oklahoma State team has been so bad. They've been so much worse than we thought they were. Oklahoma State might have been the most overrated team at the beginning of the season. They are terrible. But that win still means something because Arizona State became bowl eligible. And if you remember, Arizona State, they have not been bowl eligible for quite a while. I think they had those like recruiting violations, or actually they had COVID violations back in the day. Screw that. The team got penalized. The school got penalized for having like practices during like the COVID stuff, which was against the rules. Oh no, you can't have all these young, healthy athletes be in a room together because this weak ass virus might get them. Yeah, okay. So that they actually like got penalized for that. So Arizona State was going through all that. They've had a couple of seasons where they weren't very good. So I think this is the first time they're going to be in a bowl in a long time. So I think that makes that win actually pretty big, even though it was against a bad opponent. I'm with Kansas State and BYU up next. I don't think it's the best spot for Arizona State. And the line, I know, has moved quite a bit in this one. It's down from 5.5 to 3. So you've missed some of the better numbers if you do like Central Florida, although I still wouldn't really blame you if you wanted to take the 3. I mean, it's still sitting on that key number of 3 there. And 5.5 are in no man's land. I mean, 4.5 obviously better than 3. And 3.5 obviously better than 3 too. But still, I think it is a bad spot. I think UCF could potentially win this game. Like I said, the only thing that I really don't like about it is that, well, UCF put up too many points last week, but also they're going out to a place that they're not used to playing. Those are the only issues with it. But Arizona State's really public, man, because you're looking at a team with a better record. They've looked better in like the public eye this year. 71% of tickets and only 54% of the cash, though. So the cash discrepancy and there's reverse line movement here, both going in the direction of UCF here. So that's the lean in that one would be to Central Florida. And Central Florida, I mean, they have a pretty good offense. Like I said, although it's all on the ground, so the public seems to overlook that. Don't sleep on Skatibo. Is that how you pronounce it? Skater boy? Well, I'm going to say see you later, boy, because I think Arizona State is going to lose this game. He is their running back, yeah. But I don't like the spot for Arizona State, man. I think Central Florida might get the win in that one. But not a play for me. And speaking of my plays, let's get to it, man. So this will still only be like an hour video. Oh, wait. Did you want me to talk about anything else? Nate is usually the one that's throwing. Oh, you want me to talk about Cincinnati? That's right. I talked about the Missouri game already. Paul, what's up, man? We have not seen you in the Better Off Dead chat before, I don't think. Tower Gang fan from long ago. Paul, I don't know if I've seen you. Have you been in the Tower Gang chat recently, man? I don't know, because those chats, there are too many people in there now, so I can't really pay attention. But thanks for showing up, man. Let me see. What was I going to talk about? Oh, yeah. You wanted me to talk about Cincinnati, right? Yeah. Let's talk about that game. West Virginia at Cincinnati. So, yeah, I mean, these are almost like geographic rivals here in a way, right? Cincinnati, I'm looking at their side first. I forget what I even thought about this game. Cincinnati, they're coming out of a bye. So it looks like a decent spot for Cincinnati right off the bat to me because Cincinnati went into a bye on a loss against Colorado, even though that's always going to be a hyped opponent there. Coach Prime, Colorado. Cincinnati lost that game, but the fact that they had a bye, I think that might help them prepare something, even though they do have Iowa State and Kansas State up next. So those are big games, but I don't think they're really going to be looking ahead because they went into the bye on a bad note. They're going to use that bye to fix some things, and they're looking for their 6th win, man. They know that they're 1 win away from getting into a bowl. They're probably thinking these games are both on the road. Those are not as winnable. I think they want to get this win, man, for those reasons against West Virginia here. So I actually think those are reasons that Cincinnati should actually show up focus in this game. West Virginia, what do we got here? They are also fighting for bowl eligibility, though, man. They're at 4 wins. It's not out of the question that they're going to get into a bowl as well. And it would be a major disappointment if West Virginia did not make a bowl. West Virginia, when's the last time they did not make a bowl? We'll have to ask, I forget what the dude's name is, Appalachian Stan or whatever they got, Appalachian Stan, whatever that dude's name is. He's in the Better Off Dead Twitter group chat. He's a West Virginia fan. He could probably tell you the last time West Virginia failed to make a bowl, but it seems like every single year they're in a bowl, man. If they do not become bowl eligible, I mean, if they're 5-7, they might just petition to try to get a bowl spot if there are extra bowl spots available, and they might get it just because they have a pretty big fan base. College football, fantasy football. I don't do fantasy college football, man. It might exist, but yes, I am crazy. This is all betting on this show, Paul. I do play a fantasy NFL, though, and I do sometimes talk about my fantasy NFL teams on the show, especially in the NFL video, which is tomorrow night, by the way. Show up. My NFL card is already set for the week, by the way. So I have 3 NFL plays that I think are far and above the best NFL plays, and I don't really think the numbers are going to be different tomorrow night, so I don't know if I need to shout them out now. I'll let you be surprised. I think the numbers will still be fine tomorrow night when I do the NFL show, but this is an NFL card that I really have focused on, and I actually like. I have 3 plays, and I actually really like all of them, so hopefully I'm not wrong about them. But, like, I've seen some NFL cards, like, last week's, I was just like, I don't like this card at all. This is a week where there are 3 games, like I said, that just all of them jumped out at me, and I'm like, I gotta play these. And the rest of the card was just like, nope, ignore. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. West Virginia, they're also coming out of a bye, but they went into the bye on a higher note because they beat Arizona. So I think the bye is actually more helpful to Cincinnati in this case because they went into the bye on the worst note. But both teams, like I said, I think both teams are going to show up because they're both trying to become bowl eligible. And then you got to figure out what's going on with West Virginia's quarterback situation because they had Green in there, and it looks like he got hurt. And then they played Marshall. Is that how you pronounce his name? I don't know. But they played him in that last game. So something to keep an eye on. The West Virginia quarterback situation. I don't know if their quarterback's coming back or not in this game. Cincinnati's up from 3.5 to 4.5. So I don't know if that indicates that West Virginia's quarterback is still out. Maybe it does. 59% of the tickets and only 56% of the cash on Cincinnati. So the cash disparity is slightly against Cincinnati there. But the fact that I think the bye might help them a little bit more, and they have that bowl eligibility in sight, and they kind of need to do it right now, I think it's actually going to mitigate what looks like it might be a look ahead for Cincinnati because they might be seeing those games and thinking, we need to win right now if we're going to get bowl eligibility. So I actually slightly, I guess I would say I agree with the Cincinnati side slightly, but laying 4.5 looks kind of strange to me. So that might be an indicator that West Virginia's quarterback is still out. But if that's the case, I mean, that'll be the second game that Marshall is out, and if Green is coming back, then it's going to be the reverse injured player theory with Green coming back. So that West Virginia team, might have to get back into rhythm with him again. It might get a little bit complacent with their quarterback coming back in there. So either one of those situations actually would not be the worst situation to fade West Virginia. So I might agree with that one, but really not strong. All right, let's get to the actual plays, and then we'll call it a night here. I only have 2 plays, and I'm already 2-0 this week. I usually have around 4 plays a week in college football, and this time they just so happened that the stronger situations that I saw were midweek this time. I won on Northern Illinois a few days ago, and I won just now on UCLA, baby, with the moneyline cash. Big win for me because that gave me a winning night tonight, too. I went 3-2 tonight with that one, plus the moneyline cash. That makes me happy. It makes it a winning night for me after losing that really ugly college basketball loss in St. Joe's. I hate that. Like, that game there was nothing about that game that went the way that I thought it would. So, man. The Houston Rockets loss I'll just take because it was just whatever. They lost to a good team. Paul, good night to you as well. Good seeing you as well. Our first, pseudo agreement. Yeah, pseudo. I only slightly agree with it. I think I do, but man, it's it's very tentative. Here are these 2 games. I think these are both strong plays, man, what I'm about to talk about here. First of the 2 that's up is Rutgers +6. I think both of the teams that I'm playing on, and you probably can kind of figure out which games I'm on based on how I tend to handicap games and which games I haven't talked about yet. And I think both of my plays are coming out of buys as well. So I'm taking Rutgers plus the points here, +6 against Minnesota. Minnesota's quite public now, up from 5.5 to 6. 77% of the tickets and only 64% of the cash. So Minnesota, they've got the public action, but less of the cash. You're getting a low total here, down from 46.5 to 46, where I don't see much going on with the percentages yet on the total, but 50% of the tickets and 100% of the cash on the under. But we do see the line moving down, so it looks like maybe the money does like this game to be a little bit lower scoring, so I like that aspect of it too, because if you're taking points, again, it's a lot better to do so when it's going to be a low total, so I like that aspect of this. Let's look at the situation, though, because that's where this really comes into focus here. Minnesota, I think this is a bad spot for them, man. They just got bowl eligibility. That's always a big game. As I keep pointing out, when you get bowl eligibility, you get your 6th win. Like that, a lot of teams, that's their goal, man. And with Minnesota, I don't think they really had higher aspirations this season. They really started off looking really poor in some of these games offensively, too. So Minnesota, I think getting to a bowl was really what they aspired to this season, and they just did it. And not only did they do it, but they did it on the road against a ranked Illinois team, even though I keep saying Illinois is way overrated. So I think that's going to hype them up a little bit. Like, they're going to be happy off of that win, fat and gay, whatever, plump and gay a little bit off of that win for all of those reasons, because they clinched bowl eligibility. They beat a ranked team on the road. Big win for them, man, but Illinois is so bad at this point that Minnesota was actually the favorite in that game. And Minnesota, they had to, they were losing late. They were losing in the 4th quarter, and they scored late to win the game, too. So they were losing the game late, and it was a close game in general, and they capitalized on 2 turnovers from Illinois as well in this game. But like I said, beating Illinois is not as impressive as it looks, man. Illinois has a good record, and they're still ranked, but Illinois, they kind of suck. I keep saying it, but that's just the case. For all those reasons, that win looks a little bit better than it actually was, and I think Minnesota's just going to be pumped because that was their 6th win on the road against a ranked team. Now they have to go on the 2nd straight road game. They have to go to Rutgers, out to the East Coast, which is not really a place that they play very often. I don't know how many times they played out there. They haven't played in the Eastern time zone this entire year, I don't think, because Michigan and Illinois, I think, are both central. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. So they have not been this far east all year, and it's a 12 noon game, so that's going to be a little bit earlier for their biological clock. It's going to feel like they're playing at like 11 a.m. their time, so that's not great either. Although I always say an East Coast team going out to the Pacific Coast, 3-hour time shift into a late biological clock time, that's way worse than going east, but still, this isn't the best spot. It's not a place they're really familiar with, going to Rutgers. And who do they have up next? Even though, yes, they have a bye, but after that bye, they got Penn State, man. So after Minnesota has clinched the bowl game there, I think that really the other thing they're going to be looking forward to is playing a big game there against Penn State. That's their final home game. Penn State's coming to their house. I think that's something they're going to be looking ahead to. I think they might overlook this Rutgers team, man. And Rutgers has not been playing well recently. Rutgers has lost a bunch of games in a row and have not looked good. And their defense, which looked like it was a decent defense earlier in the season, has completely fallen apart in the last 3 games. So I don't know what team is going to be looking at this Rutgers recent run here and really paying attention to Rutgers. I mean, you're going to look at this, oh yeah, Rutgers has been sucking. Like, I don't think we need to pay attention to this Rutgers team. So I could see Minnesota overlooking Rutgers for all those reasons. But Rutgers, they're coming out of a bye, man. So Rutgers, I think that bye came at the best possible spot for them, really, or one of the best possible spots. 4-game loss streak. The bye is coming at a good point there, man, because that's going to help disrupt that losing momentum. You're going to prepare something. You're sitting at 4-4. You want to become bowl eligible, and you got some winnable games on your schedule here, so you could potentially do that. You got to split your last 4 games 2-2. That's doable for Rutgers, so I think that's the focus here. So Rutgers, I think, is going to be the team that wants to win this game more because they still need to try to get bowl eligibility, whereas Minnesota already got it, and I think that was basically their goal for the season, and it is accomplished now. That bye should be helpful for Rutgers, so they're going to be the more rested team and probably going to be getting something prepared here, getting focused for this. So I like it for Rutgers. I mean, these losses, yeah, some of them were pretty ugly. This UCLA one was kind of glaring, but as I keep talking about, UCLA, they're not as bad as they look. I mean, they've played a really difficult schedule, so maybe that loss isn't that horrible looking. Wisconsin, Wisconsin's still a team that's pretty decent. I mean, they can beat you up, and USC is not that bad either. So Nebraska, who knows? But Rutgers, I mean, those losses, they're not like the most horrible looking losses, I guess I would say. But I like Rutgers in this game for all those reasons, man. It's a bad spot for Minnesota. I think the situational read, it's a lot. I do, these late season situations where teams that have clinched a bowl spot and that was their goal on the season, you want to look to go against those teams when they just did it, and you want to be playing on teams that are still fighting to get into the bowl. So that was what we got there. I like Rutgers. The Rutgers QB, how do you pronounce his name? I don't even know. Kyla Kamanis. I have no idea how you pronounce his name. Kalia Kamanis. Kalia Kamanis. Yeah, I think that's right. And Monangai is their running back. Yeah, so I could see that going both ways, actually, with the quarterback transfer situation like that. I forgot about that. But on the one hand, Minnesota is going to maybe know his tendencies because he did play there. But on the other hand, he's probably going to know what their schemes are. So, like, that's the thing. So, on the one hand, I think you have I'm trying to think, like, because I played it was a similar situation with the Miami Cal game. I'm trying to remember exactly what that situation was. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was Cal's coach used to be, I forget what it was, or Cal's quarterback. I don't even remember. I don't even want to guess what I was thinking in that game. But with the quarterback playing against his former team, it goes both ways, I think. So that quarterback is going to know that, like, defense's tendencies, but the defense is going to know his tendencies. So I can see it going both ways there. But I just think that the motivational standpoint of this game is on the Rutgers side. Yeah, Monangai, he's going to be in the NFL. Could very well be the case. And then my last play, which may be the better of these two plays, the one that I like a little bit more is Virginia plus 7.5. I like this one as well. This is a fade of Pitt in this one. Pitt is still ranked, and Pitt is still going to be the public team here, man. Let me look here. Pitt, they're down from 8 to 7.5, so we see a bit of reverse line movement here. 69% of the tickets on them and 71% of the cash all the way over on the other side in Virginia, man. So a huge ticket cash disparity in this one. Public is liking Pittsburgh, man. I think they're thinking, hey, Pittsburgh was undefeated. They just lost a game. They're going to bounce back against an inferior Virginia team, right? That's the public's thinking. I don't think so at all. I think this is a situation where you lose the game twice, as I keep saying, for lack of a better term there. Pittsburgh, they are still sitting at ranked 18, but as I mentioned last week, I think Pittsburgh is definitely overrated. I mean, they've played a very weak schedule. And that Syracuse win, which is like their best win that they've had, I mean, they had 3 pick sixes and they were +5 in turnovers in that game. So like I said, that game was not what it looked like on the scoreboard at all. And they only put up like 200-something yards of offense. And they got exposed, man, by SMU. SMU, like, basically just shredded them for the most part. So that was one of my wins last week. That was my favorite play last week, was SMU. SMU did it, and I laid the 7 with SMU, and they easily covered in that game. So Pittsburgh, that's the type of win, man, that you tend to lose twice. Or that's the type of loss, that tends to hang you over, and you tend to lose the game twice, I should say. It's the type of game you tend to lose twice. So Pittsburgh, they were rolling along. They were undefeated. They faced the best team that they faced this season. Huge game. It was a big-time hyped game between two ranked teams, and they lost the game. They're not used to losing this season. They took their first loss. I think that's going to hurt them coming into this game against Virginia, man. And Virginia, a team they might overlook because they're just sitting kind of middle of the pack here in the conference. They might not totally pay attention to them. And who do they have up next? Clemson and then Louisville right after that. So if you're Pittsburgh, those are two of the teams right around you that you're still kind of battling in the ACC. So that makes this a sandwich spot, man. As much as Pittsburgh is maybe going to want to continue to be focused to try to, like, get into the ACC championship or whatever, this is a tough spot to bounce back from. I don't know how you get back up off the mat after that loss like that, and with huge games up next. I think you might overlook this Virginia team that hasn't been playing that well, but this Virginia team, I've been saying they're not that bad. They had a lot of returning starters this year. I think Virginia's a little bit under the radar, And talking about these teams going into buys at the right time, I think it's happening for Virginia too, man. They went into a bye on a 3-game loss streak, but they lost to Louisville and Clemson, who are two of the better teams in the ACC. Clemson probably the best team in the ACC. And then maybe that Clemson loss just kind of hung them over because I don't know what this was, losing to North Carolina like that. But then they went into a bye, man. So when you lose ugly like that, which may have been explained because maybe it was a hangover spot after Clemson, you use that bye to try to fix things, man. And Virginia's sitting at 4-4. They're probably looking at their upcoming schedule and seeing all these ranked teams coming up, and maybe they're thinking we can't do it. But, I mean, you're probably going to be motivated when you're playing one of these other ranked teams in the conference, man, and you're probably going to still try to take a shot right now. Like, you're not dead yet. Coming out of a bye, I think you're going to use that bye to refocus. You know who you have upcoming. You're going to use that bye to game plan for this. You're going to try to get that 5th win, and then maybe that can like be that spark, and maybe you're going to be able to get that bowl eligibility, even though it's going to be a tough road. I like Virginia in this one, though, for all those reasons, man. So both of my plays tomorrow, I think they're coming at opportune times, and I think that's going to do it. So long video, not as long as a lot of my other ones. My video last week was like an hour and 45 minutes or whatever. So 4 plays this week overall in college football, but only 2 on Saturday, and I'm already 2-0. College football has been really good for me this year, man, and let's keep it going. College football, I mean, it only makes sense after I had 2 pretty bad college football seasons, the last 2 seasons. Bounce back season, baby, in college football. It's been really nice. Rutgers +6 and Virginia +7.5 are the 2 plays for me for college football tomorrow. You were on Pitt last week. I told you, Nate. I told you, man. Sorry. I apologize, but that was I loved the spot for SMU last week. And that one, thanks, Nate, to you. Thanks for hanging out, man. Thanks to all you guys for hanging out. Whoever you all are. Paul, Hugh, I don't know. I try to run it down quickly. Urjo, Nate, of course. Did I get all you guys? I don't know. That might have been all you guys. If I missed anybody, I apologize. But thanks, guys, for all hanging out. I'm Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter. I had a big week with the election happening. I had a nice burst where I picked up like 3,000 followers in a day with a couple of huge tweets that I had there. So I want to keep my Twitter growing as well. Keep that monetization rolling in, man. And follow the Tower Gang podcast, obviously. And you can subscribe to the Patreon if you would like to. Patreon.com/TowerGang to support the most offensive comedy podcast on the planet, man. Every Wednesday night, you can tune into Tower Gang. And if you sign up for the Patreon, you get live pre-show, post-show. We were going again this week. We were at full strength again this week, even though Clint was very sleepy. He still was a trooper. He was there for the whole thing. Even the post-show, even though he said he might not even be able to do the show at all, he did the whole thing. So go check that out. And if you want to see the post-show, subscribe to the Patreon. We played our Bohemian Grove lady at it during the post-show and that one. We may play it on the mainline episode too, but who knows? And if you're in the Patreon, you also get to be in a Telegram with us and submit mailbag comments and questions, which usually just become wild, degenerate theoreticals. Chase Oliver does indeed suck. That's going to do it for me. And as I always point out on these football shows, because on the longer shows, I shout out flapper.net, FLAPPR.net. Those guys are humorous. They have a humorous blog, and it is a blog where they discuss the beauty of women. They discuss football. They put out an NFL recap blog post. It's always pretty funny every single week. So it's a fun read every week. I started reading it every week. It makes me laugh. You guys can go check that out. And they definitely have some pro Chicago Bear bias there, because the guy that writes those blogs, the guy that runs the Flapper account on Twitter or whatever, he's a Bears fan. So it is very enjoyable. And I'm running betting odds for their Milkers of the Year award, which is the second year that they're doing that, which is basically just we take women with nice racks who have been in the public spotlight over the course of the year or have done something like that. Some of them in the realm of politics, because these guys do still talk about politics and stuff as well. And we basically just kind of bullshit and make it up and be like, oh yeah, this woman's going to win Milkers of the Year. And we have different categories for it with different types of women. So go check that out as well. That's going to do it, man. I will see you. Well, tomorrow morning I'm going to come in and I don't know how I'm going to handicap this college basketball slate, man. I mean, they're just college basketball when it overlaps with the football Saturday. This is like one of the toughest weeks to do it because it's overloaded. It's so much, man. So college basketball is in full swing now. I'm not off to a great start, 2-2-1, but I want to keep going. NBA continues. I think I'm 4-6 in the NBA now, so not great there either. NBA has been my best sport the last few years, really over my entire career. It's been the best. So I'm going to talk about all that and NHL. All of those sports are going on tomorrow, so I will be back in the morning. Likely I'll have some additional plays in at least some of those sports tomorrow once I actually break down the card, which I'm probably not going to do until tomorrow morning. And I'll be back tomorrow night with the NFL show. As Nate just said, I already know exactly what my plays are in the NFL, so I'm expecting that the lines won't change much, which is why I have not mentioned them yet. But, yeah, I mean, I think they're all really strong NFL plays. I like my NFL plays, a trio of NFL plays this week. You'll hear me break them down, and you'll maybe think I'm completely psycho, but because I think I'm fading like very heavy public sentiment on all of them. But we'll talk about it then. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Peace out.